Welcome back, folks. As you know, in the previous tutorials, we imported some Illustrator artwork. We prepped the Illustrator artwork. We imported it into After Effects. We color-coded and organized the composition, and we started blocking out the basic time. But at the moment, things just sort of appear, and we want to create some much more stylish transitions and animated elements. So one of the things I want to do for these two key shapes is I want a wipe from left to right, where they're slowly revealed, and it just looks a little more slick than just bop and bop. Yeah. So I'm going to go to the beginning of this layer where it first appears, and I'm going to add a new shape layer. We're going to be using a mask for this process, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw a shape, make sure it covers the area we want, then animate that shape, and then apply that shape as a mask to our artwork. So we're going to go up to Layer, we're going to go to New, and we're going to choose Shape Layer. Okay, and then we can draw out a rectangle like so. Okay, and this rectangle, I'm just going to give it a garish color. So red's good for me. I don't want any stroke on it, but there's a 0 stroke. Give it a fill. I usually like to use a color that I can't accidentally leave in, so I'm going to use like this horrific kind of magenta color. That's pretty hard to leave in. Okay, I'm not going to accidentally find it's visible at some point. And you'll see that at the moment that's created a new shape layer at the top here, and that shape is going to appear in the center like that. I've dragged it out so that it's bigger than the bits I'm animating at the moment, and you can see it's popped it open, and I can see that it has a rectangle in it, etc. Excuse me, got hiccups. I'll just toggle that up for the moment. I don't need all of those elements, and let's call this right click and name this right click, not double click, and name this, let's call it mask 1. Okay, so you can, it's sometimes useful to move that to the bottom so that you can make sure you can see the artwork that you're dealing with. So I'm just going to shift click on it, drag it to the bottom, release. And we're going to start with this slightly off the side, but eventually we want it to come across. Now it's a bit bigger than I need, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in using the selection tool, and I'm just going to slightly resize it. I just need it to cover the logo. I don't need it to cover everything else, so I'll make it a little bit smaller, like so. You can also use the align palettes over on the right to make sure it's aligned to the composition. I don't want it to be aligned that way centrally, and I'm going to drag it slightly over to the right here to make sure it covers everything. Okay, so get it in a good position so that at the end it will have revealed these 3 elements. I'm actually going to get it to transition on the trademark as well, perhaps. We'll see. But just in case, I'm going to animate it to go right across. Okay, so what I want to do now with that mask element selected is I want to create some animation for it, and to do that I'm going to be animating its position. So the shortcut for position with the layer selected is P, and you can see that brings up the position thing. You can get to the same thing by toggling down the layer, toggling down the transform. You can see it's here with everything else, but this creates a lot more clutter on your interface. So I can just use shortcut of P for position. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the point where, just in case I want to animate it so that it covers and reveals the trademark symbol as well, to about here, I'm going in this case 4 seconds and 15 frames. So past my first shape, past my second, and even past my trademark thing. And I'm going to click the little stopwatch. What that's going to do in After Effects is it's going to create a keyframe. So you see a little diamond appears here because of the type of keyframe it is. And you see the stopwatch goes blue, which shows it's watching that property. Now I'm going to go back beforehand. So the reason I've done that is I've put the object in the finishing place. I'm going to go back to the beginning before the reveal of the shape 1. And I'm now, with this, making sure I've got the mask layer selected, not shape 1. I'm going to move the properties. In this case, I'm going to move it left by dragging these coordinates. So you could drag or shift drag the shape in the window if you prefer. It doesn't matter, and I want it to just be on the edge of the shape, so it's not quite there yet. It's just slightly to the left. Okay, if you're not sure, you can also enter a value. So in this case, let's make it 456. Okay, so it's just offset. So at the moment, it'll come across, cover that shape, and then wipe across the other and be there ready for when the trademark element comes in if I wanted to use the wipe for that. Okay, so that is my wiping transition. If I move to the left, hit play, you'll see that it's fairly slow. We can speed it up later, and obviously we've got this ugly pink rectangle at the moment. So let's try that out on the shape. So I'm just going to toggle that closed. I'm going to click and drag my mask layer back onto the top of the stack. And for the base type of masking, there are 3 types of masking you can do in After Effects, but we're going to cover this. We're doing sort of fairly simple whistle-stop tour to bringing something in, animating it a bit, and exporting it. So I'm not going to go in depth. If you want to know more about masking in After Effects, you can Google it. Some great tutorials that teach you all of the different techniques. And the downside of the technique we're going to use today, although it's nice and simple, is that you end up with extra layers. Now, if you're new to After Effects, that can actually be helpful because you can see where your masks are. But a masked object needs to be above the object it's going to mask. So that's why I've dragged it to the top of the layer stack. And what I'm going to do as well while I'm at it is I'm just going to colour it. Let's go for fuchsia, which is the pink, so that I can recognise it in the timeline. And to make that object mask the object below, okay, I'm going to come down here, and what I'm going to do is actually select the layer below, shape 1, and I'm going to use track matte. Now if you can't see track matte, it could be that your little button down here is not selected. Okay, now unfortunately with the screen capture software I'm using, that's where my pause button is, so I'm not going to hit it. But this second button in here is the little button on the interface that reveals the track matte option. Okay, so if it's not visible, if you click that little box, it will show and hide this column. Sometimes when you're not using stuff like this, you want to hide it because you've got enough going on the interface. You just don't need all these extra things like parents and children and stuff like that. So if you can't see track matte, click that little second icon in at the bottom here, and then make sure you can see this. It stands for track matte. Okay, if you hover over, you can see it tells you. And now with shape 1 selected, which is my white shape here, I'm going to use the pop-up and tell it. You can see here it's got a number of options. The first one is alpha matte mask 1. Now alpha means it's going to use the sort of transparency channel from the layer mask 1 as its matte, as its mask. You can also invert this, which would do the exact opposite. Okay, I'm not going to play around with any of these. I'm just going to pick the top one, but notice that it's got the name here from the layer. So alpha of that. Now when I scrub my timeline, you will see I get that nice transitional wipe, and then just as we get to the end, the other one just appears. So it's only applied it to layer 1. Now in theory I could do the same thing here, but you see now when I try, it's going to try and use shape 1. Now I don't want that, so I've got a problem with this type of masking. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go to the top layer, select it. I'm going to go up to edit and copy, and I'm just going to copy that mask layer, including all of its properties, all of the tween properties we set up with an animation. You'll see that the icon, sorry, I should have mentioned, the icon has changed here, and also automatically has made the mask invisible, but you can see the eye icon for the shape is changed to having almost like a cataract effect, because it is now being masked. Okay, I should have mentioned that before. I'm going to click on shape 2. Remember that I've copied mask 1, and I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to paste, and it will paste on top. And you can see it's auto renamed it. If it hadn't, I would right click and rename. So now I've got a copy of the same mask. I don't need to change the animation, I hope. We'll find out in a minute. And I can now go to shape 2 and do the same thing. And if you notice, you'll see there'll be a little mask icon here coming up very much like the one before. So I'm going to choose alpha, but in this case mask 2 for shape 2. And you can see those two have now become locked, and again this one is now hidden. Now we can see what that looks like. So we've got a wipe on the white, followed by the instant wipe straight through the yellow, which I quite like. And then let's just apply that to the trademark as well while we're at it. So again, I'm going to hit that layer, and can't right click it, need to edit and paste or Control V, And again, once more, go to the trademark layer and use the alpha matte, in this case from mask 3. Now you can see that's added extra layers, which is filled out our timeline a little bit, but it does mean that you can sort of see what's going on because you can see these relationships. There is a way where you can actually embed the mask data inside the layers, so it only occupies one layer here, but we're not going to deal with that today. So let's just scrub the timeline. In fact, let's go back to the beginning, drag back, hit space bar. Let's see what we've got. So we've got this kind of nice white. It's maybe a bit slow, but it's not too bad. Followed by that, it might be because I'm also screencasting. Followed by the Acumen, which just comes in and sits there. So that's going to be our next target. So that'll do for the first bit. That's just using basic masking to reveal layers. So in this case, we've set up what would be described traditionally in film as a wipe. Okay. Effect. Now we could add other complexity to it. We could tween the transparency of those shapes while they're being wiped. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to leave it as really kind of clean. I want it to be very graphic, that A. Then we have a slight pause when that's come in. The trademark's now revealed. And we'll have a pause before Acumen comes in. So we're going to switch to that in the next tutorial and focus on animating this brand naming. See you in the next tutorial.